Good afternoon, everybody. I am Mark Werber, your Director of Association Management Software. I'm joined today by your fabulous trainers, Diane Clem and Frank Rittersdorf.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Today's webinar topic is inventory. We're going to do an inventory series. Today's part one is getting started, or how to set up your inventory from scratch. So let's get started. As always, we're coming to you live from our multimedia studios here in Simi Valley, California. It takes a village to pull off these webinars, so I'd like to take a moment to introduce those working behind the scenes. From left to right is Sabrina Steffen. She's our marketing coordinator, and she does all of our correspondence and emails. Mark Boatman is our multimedia specialist. He's turning the knobs behind the scenes. That's me in the middle, followed by Diane and Frank.
And again, we are on Rapattoni Magic version 10. We're still on 10.1.06. Get your upgrade if you have not. A lot of great enhancements. We want to make sure your magic is running at its fullest potential.
Let's discuss the agenda. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to break down inventory into a three-part series. Today's part one, or getting started, we're going to use the Inventory Manager's Getting Started feature to show you how to set up your inventory from scratch for the first time. The next webinar will be part two, or inventory maintenance, where we will discuss how to use your working inventory day to day. And then part three of the series, we're going to focus exclusively on the Internet Member Services store. This is your online store where agents can go and purchase inventory items. So let's talk about part one, getting started.
So as we're narrowing down to the inventory setup, there's a number of different topics we're going to be covering. And kind of going right through this list, we're going to be creating the charge codes, then we're going to create product categories, which is going to help group the different products, create vendor types and vendors. We want to keep track of those vendors. Input inventory items, as well as verify those items, always checking your work. And then as well as physical inventory, it's where you're doing the hard labor, and then enter the inventory counts into your Magic software. Let's get started.
Thanks, Frank. The first thing we're going to look at is creating charge codes. And we don't mean by charge, we don't mean charging our eco-friendly little red car like the picture here. What we mean is setting up our charge code for our inventory items. First, we're going to go to Magic, and we're going to use the Getting Started menu in Inventory to get to the charge code table. So we're going to go from Membership to Inventory to Getting Started. Getting Started is a simple checklist that is set up in several places in Magic. Anytime you have to go through a process, we have these step-by-step tables set up for you, so it's easy for you to get where you need to go. First step is going to be creating charge codes. Click the button, it takes you directly to your charge code table. Normally you're going to use Control-E to create a charge code, but we have one set up for you today. Our item is the power of positive thinking. We're going to keep things very positive today. Whenever you're setting up a charge code, you're going to pay special attention to certain things, and in the case of an inventory item, the first thing we're going to look at is your charge code set. Your charge code set points to the billing group, which points to GL numbers, so your accounting information is important. Make sure you're pointing to the correct billing group. Next, you're going to look at the GL account that you want to assign to that specific item. And to the right of that, you can see that you can designate what you're going to charge non-members for this item, or if you offer that item on IMS, how you're going to charge that on IMS as well. We'll cover that more in detail at a later webinar. Next, you're going to look and make sure that you have taxable checked if this is an item that you're going to be charging tax on. Now that we've created the charge code, we're going to create a product category. Under the product category, you can divide your inventory items into different categories so they're broken out, such as supplies, books, and so forth. We're looking at books, and you can set up a default cost account here. Your default cost account is going to point to your expense GL. And then you would set up your inventory account, which is going to point to your assets GL. And then to the far right, you can set up whether you want, how you want the item to be viewed on IMS. So let's summarize. First, we looked at creating our charge codes. We went to the charge code table, paid special attention to the bill group, designated what we're going to charge for non-members or IMS prices, made note of our GL account that we're going to use when setting up this charge code, and determined whether the item is taxable. Then we created product categories. Here we can set up our default cost account, which is our expense account, and our default inventory account, which is our asset account. We also will have an opportunity to set that item up on our IMS, which we'll go over in our later webinar.
Thank you, Diane. Now let's talk about those crazy vendors. You know, they've given you pens and signs and whatnot. We got to keep track. Who are we doing business with? So let's go into Magic and take a look. So using our Getting Started wizard, our step-by-step process helper here, we can go ahead and go to step 3, which is create vendor types. This is a great grouping mechanism to group your different vendors. In the case that we're looking at, since we have the power of positive thinking book, must be working with our PPOW, our powerful positive books vendor type, because we have a group of vendors that have some really great positive books, powerful positive books. So this is just basically a basic table. Create your own types and describe them. From there, we're going to look at the vendors, because we want to be able to put some different vendors in those vendor types. Look at this. We got P-Power, our vendor, powerfully positive books. Running theme here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that vendor information. Just your basic contact information. Like, for instance, the attention care of Anthony Robbins. I think we've all heard of him. And as well as their street address, like on Positive Way. 1233 Positive Way. Tommy Robbins, which is probably Anthony's brother, I'm assuming. And then also the terms of how you're receiving the information, 10/30. So just a great way to really keep up your contact information. If you ever need to contact them, tell them they're overbilling you and whatnot, then or they're raising their prices too fast. This is a great little table here for you to go in and look up that information and contact them. Another great feature of this is that you actually can cross-reference. You can find out what inventory items are linked to that vendor by clicking on this button. Let's review. So we talked about the vendor type table, and that's again grouping your vendors, which you can make up your own types, however kind of groupings you want to put your vendors in. And then also you can have the vendor information form, where you put in the contact information as well as cross-reference what items are associated with that vendor. Much easier than searching line by line in your vendor information table, which Mark is going to show us what that does.
Okay, now that we've done all of our initial setup, it's time to enter the item into inventory. By clicking on the inventory query form, it'll take you to a list of existing inventory items. In this case, since we're setting up inventory for the first time, let's go ahead and add a brand new inventory item. We'll go to Create Mode, and it'll bring us to the details of the inventory information form. The first thing that we're prompt for is the charge code. Diane created the charge code in the first step, so all we need to do is zoom or press F5. That'll navigate us to the charge code query form, and there's my item, The Power of Positive Thinking. That's a great book. So we're going to select that item, and it pulls it into the inventory information form. Next, we're going to group this item into a product category. Since this is a book, we already have a category 10 that is described as books. So we're going to select that one and bring it into our inventory information form. Now, who do we normally buy these books from? If we zoom, we'll go and we'll select the vendor. The vendor is Powerfully Positive Books vendor. So we'll select that vendor. See how we're building our inventory information? The product ID is usually the ID that is designated by the vendor. In Magic, we use a charge code to identify that item. However, the vendor you purchase the item from may have their own product ID that's where you'll indicate that information here. The next field is the cost basis of code. The inventory manager essentially tracks two types of cost basis. Averaging, where the price you paid is average across all items, or the cost is always fixed. So in this case, we're going to use averaging. Shipping weight and internet store info, we're going to save that information for a future webinar, but essentially the shipping weight is designed to assign a value or a cost when you ship the item. Again, we'll go into that in much more detail in the internet store webinar portion. Locations. Locations in the center of the form. This is where the item is going to physically be located. You'll notice that a location is directly linked to a billing group, and you can have multiple locations, especially if you have a bunch of branch offices. In this case, this item is going to be physically located by zooming to the billing group at the Anytown Association of Realtors. Also, to make sure your shelves are constantly stocked, there's a minimum stock option. So how many of these books do we always want to keep in stock? 10. When we go below this amount, the software will warn you, or you can run a reorder report to determine what is low on stock. The reorder quantity is defined to allow you to specify when you reorder these items how many come in a case. So in this case, they come in a box of 50. The cost of sales account as well as the inventory account have defaulted from the product category, which we set up earlier. However, you can overwrite these values for a specific item. Status is pretty straightforward. The status of the item, we're currently selling it, so it's active. If it happens to be something that you no longer provide but want to keep history, you can inactivate that item. Also within the inventory manager, you have the ability to print labels. Labels allow you to label that item with a barcode so that you can scan it when the agent brings it up to the counter, or it can actually have the description and the price on it. And then IMS status defines whether you want that item to be sold online or not. The bottom section of the form, as you can see, is blank because that's stock status. The stock status will be updated when items are purchased and added to inventory, or when they're sold through inventory. So once we post the purchase order, we can come back and review the stock status. Okay, let's summarize. So the inventory query form is where we enter all the details about the inventory item. When you enter an item from scratch, you'll zoom and select your charge code, product categories, the vendor you purchase it from. These steps can actually all be done on the fly. We also identified how the inventory manager uses the cost basis codes. We have two bases for accounting for inventory items. That's averaging or fixed costs. Pay specific attention to the location. That's where the item is physically located, as well as the minimum stock that you want to keep on hand, and the reorder quantity for your purchase order. You don't want your shelves to look similar to this picture. And also, we entered the cost of sales account and the inventory account. Those default from the product category, but they can be overwritten for each individual inventory item.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Now let's go into verify these inventory items. So we've entered all the inventory items. Just in general, if you're starting this up, you would enter all those, create those all inventory items and put them into those forms. You create multiple forms or a form for each inventory item you want to put in there. So now let's check that. Let's make sure we've put everything right, everything looks good. And we're going to do that by using a inventory report. Now there's a number of different formats or different inventory options you have here for the inventory report. We're just going to use the inventory item report. And we would hit create report here. And voila, there's our report. So let's kind of dissect this thing. There's a lot of things going on in this report. And it's a great way, it's a way they've got this set up where you have rows and then columns as well. So you kind of have to look. There's three headers up at the top, which associate with the information down below. So basically what we have here on the left is just some basic information regarding your inventory items, as well as we have the bill group and the different statuses you might have. Now let's really dig down right after we cover the inventory or accounting GL account numbers, like inventory, sales accounts, and cost of goods accounts. Now let's really dig down into these numbers here. What do these mean? Well, the first thing we have is quantity on hand, which is associated with our 44. That means we have 44 items for this 1016 charge code. The sales per month, we have no sales for this month, but sales for the year is we have 8. Yes, you will see a negative number for the sales because every time you sell or create an invoice, it does take it out of the inventory. The next column we have another 3 different points. The first thing we have is the last update, which is 5/30/08, which someone in our accounting really needs to get onto that month-end process to kind of update this date. We also have quantity, which was the same quantity that we currently have. Also cost. We have the average cost, like Mark said in the inventory item form, that we are going by an average cost. So the average is $3.69. The next thing we have is the last purchase date. That was 9/22/98. This must be a high volume type of product that we got going here. We also have a purchase price, which is $3.75. And then the current average cost is $3.69. As you can see, the last time we purchased it probably was just a little bit more than what we were purchasing this item in the past. So as you can see, the average is a little bit lower than the actual cost that we just on our last purchase price. Now the last couple of columns we have here are really associated with the pricing and what we're selling these items at compared to the costs. So first we have member pricing, which was $4.95, and that's what we sold that for. The member gross profit was $1.26, if you round it up, and that's because the average cost was $3.69. So you kind of subtract the cost from the price, of course, and you get your gross profit, which also this report gives us a nice little member markup percentage, would have been 34%. Now if we look at our non-member pricing, as Diane had mentioned in the charge code, you can set that price to be different. We want our members to feel like they're getting the perks here at this association, and so they get a discounted price on our inventory products. So for non-member, the price is $5.95, a whole dollar more. And then of course our gross profit is $2.26. As you can see, because we're still comparing it to the same cost that we have here of $3.69, which gives us that non-member percentage markup of 61%. So a great way to really kind of understand what we're selling the items for, what we're getting the items for, all on a nice centralized report. And so you can really and analyze that data and what your inventory really, how much money that inventory is really making for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and review. So we looked at the inventory report, and we looked at some of the things. We had the basic information, but we also had the inventory sales and cost of sales account. Those are those GL accounts that, again, come from the product category and are automatically defaulted into the inventory item code, but they show it right on this report. Also, we talked about the quantity on hand as well as sales for the month or even the year. And then we covered the member and non-member prices, how the gross profit amounts, as well as the margin percentages really kind of help you analyze that data. And again, the reason we're doing this, because we check your work. You probably heard this on multiple webinars that we've done. We say do something and then check your work. So there we go.
Thanks, Frank. And now it's time to get physical. Whether you're fit and trim like Olivia Newton-John, or whether you're rotund and wobbly like our little treadmill guy, you're going to get up and take a walk through your store and do a physical count so you know exactly what you have on hand in your store with your inventory. Once you've done that, you go back to getting started and you're going to, you can use the inventory report to go ahead and create an inventory count sheet to use when you're doing your physical count. we go. So you have an easy step-by-step checklist of your charge codes, your item, and then a place for you to note the physical count. So as you go through your store, you're going to note you have 5 of these, 6 of these, what needs to be reordered, and what have you. Next thing you're going to do is enter your physical inventory. Enter your item counts. When you click on item counts, you're going to go to the purchase order query form where we're going to create a new purchase order to enter counts. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we're setting up initial inventory here. So when we create our purchase order, we're going to enter everything that we've counted at the store in one PO. Top portion is a list of the purchase orders. We use Control E to create a new purchase order. And we can name this purchase order anything that we like. In this case, we've used Control A to create a purchase order. Okay. We can name this purchase order anything that we would like. We can use Control A to automatically populate, or we can call this setup any way we would like to do it. We're going to select our billing group so we know where the money is going to go relative to this initial order. The vendor that we select is going to be a null vendor. We don't actually want to record information in this initial purchase order. You're not buying it from anybody. Excuse us for a minute while we get our purchase order going here.
Pick that one again.
And select our billing group and our vendor. We can zoom in to select our vendor. And it says no. There's a vendor there called no.
I didn't see it. Sorry, hang on. Let me look at it again.
There we go.
There we go.
Excellent. So expected date is just a free-form portion of the purchase order form. In case you are actually ordering this from a vendor, you can note your expected date. Date received is the day you're going to receive the goods. Now, nothing exists in Magic until you actually post a purchase order. So we're going to go ahead and go down to the charge code area. You remember on that purchase order item count report, we were able to see the charge codes to the left and then our counts to the right. So we can easily select our charge code, enter in the amount that we have on hand under quantity ordered, and then use F4 to get to the next line. We can also enter our unit cost.
This is the first time we've entered this in, so we'll have to enter that in there.
Yeah. So use F4 to create your next line and enter your next item and so forth. So you can enter as many items as you need to until your entire inventory in your store is entered on this purchase order, and then you're ready to post it and actually create that information in Magic. But before we do that, let's go ahead and review. First, we noted you're going to have to take a physical count of your inventory. You have to take a walk out to your store and count all your items, and we have a very useful report to help you do that. Next, we're going to go to our purchase order query form and create a master purchase order. Purchase order number can be anything you'd like it to be. Point it to the correct billing group and then enter the number of items from the count sheet that you printed so that you can easily record all of that information into Magic. Now, as I mentioned earlier, nothing exists in Magic in your inventory until you post it, so your last step is going to be to post that purchase order.
Not so fast, Diane. We're going to hold off on that. I think we're running out of time here, so come back to see what happens next in our second of our inventory presentation series, which is going to be inventory maintenance, working in the inventory on a day-to-day basis.
Before we go, we should summarize everything we covered today because it's a lot of information. So we use the getting started step-by-step procedure to set up our inventory from scratch. The first step was to create a charge code. Once the charge code was created, we created product categories in the inventory section, paying special attention to the cost of goods account as well as the inventory account for your general ledger. We created new vendor types and added our vendors who we purchased those items from. Once all of our setup was done, we went into the inventory information form and added our inventory items. Once inventory items are added, we could print the inventory report to get a snapshot of everything that was entered, as well as the cost that we purchased them for and sell them for and our profit that was made. Then it was time to count those items, so we ran a count sheet to get the physical inventory counts. Once we knew everything that we had on hand in physical inventory, we went to the purchase order form to enter our items. We haven't posted them yet, so they're not live, so you're going to have to tune in for our next webinar session where we're going to take that purchase order and post it into inventory.
Now it's time for our question and answer session.
That was a lot of information for today, so I'm just wondering if there's any questions out there.
I have a question here. Can I create a different charge code set for inventory items only? And the answer to that is yes, you can. You can create a separate charge code set for inventory items only, but remember that the set points to a billing group or a GL company. Only separate them out if you're going to keep that on separate books. Next question. Why can't I go back in and change the date info on a purchase order?
Well, that's a good question.
Even after it's
Once a purchase order is posted into inventory, it's locked down. So if you post it, say, January 1st, then it affects all of your future sales as well as your journal entry effective January 1st. So since things happen after that date, it is not possible to go back and change the date of a posted inventory item. Kind of like an invoice. When you create an invoice, once it's posted, it's permanent. However, when we do our next webinar session, we will cover how to do inventory adjustments. So even though you can't go back and adjust a posted purchase order, you can go back and adjust your quantities and price through an inventory adjustment. Again, we'll cover that in our next session.
We have another question here. Can one code be used for two different bill groups?
Yes, actually, one code can be used for two separate bill groups. So if you have a mug and you sell it in location A and location B, you can use the same charge code for that. You can't use the same charge code for two different charge code sets, though. So charge code sets, you'll have to use two different codes, but for billing groups, you can definitely use the same code. If it's a trick question, don't throw it out.
All right, next question. Do you have to create separate inventory categories, or can you use only one if you have a smaller store? And you can use only one inventory category if you'd like, or you can create multiple. Remember, your default cost account and inventory account codes are set up in your product category table, so be careful to make sure those numbers are the same.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have. If you happen to have any more questions after the webinar, make sure you email us at webinars@rapattoni.com. And now it's time for Rapattoni Wrap Up!
No one does that like Frank.
Oh.
Okay, to view past and future webinars and to register for upcoming webinars, visit our website at www.rapattoni.com. Click on Support, Magic, Webinars, and Training Videos. You can view our entire library of webinars, as well as register for upcoming webinars. You can also find useful information by clicking on Support, Magic, and Magic Resource articles. You can search for your topic of interest and get information on various items in that location.
And our next Magic webinar will be held on May 29th, 2013. Inventory maintenance. Using the inventory on a day-to-day basis. This presentation will show you the different tools in Magic to ensure an accurate count of your inventory.
Looking forward to that.
Thank you, and we'll be talking to you next month for our next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.